Hello everybody, welcome to Bandits and Bookworms. My name is Deidre and today we're going to do a whole February wrap up. So in this video, ordinarily I would put up 3 different videos for this, but I don't feel like doing that this time. We're just going to do one big giant video. So this is probably going to be long at the end and I apologize in advance. Or I don't. If you like longer form content, if that's what you want, then great. In this video, I'm going to be going over my unhauls, my hauls, and my reading wrap up from February. I'm going to start with my unhauls because there's a list and I'm going to be going through my list in sort of an order and I'll give you a vague reason as to why I am unhauling the book, but I'm not going to go into what each book is about necessarily just because there are literally 18 books on this list, which is a pretty decent unhaul for how small my library is. You see the vast majority of it behind me, so I got rid of a lot of books. You can also see that I have fairly well cleared out my shelves. There's a lot of blank spaces back there for my list of things to talk about today, which is sitting off to the side here. So let's go through my unhauls list. I'll be putting right here the covers of all of the books that I have unhauled because they're gone already. I did it. They've left the building. Unhauls are as follows. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. If you saw my January reading wrap up, you know why I am unhauling this. I wasn't a huge fan of it. It was fine. Somebody else is going to get more enjoyment out of it than me. It's time for it to move on and have its own home. Same thing goes for Gallant, also by V.E. Schwab. That one is also, it was fine. Someone else is going to enjoy it more. And for the record, I gave all of these books to friends of mine, so I didn't even end up selling any of them. They were all just gifted away. Next up was Scenes of the Crime by Jilly Gagnon. That's what we're going with. This is a book that I hard DNF'd last year. I hated this book. It takes a lot for me to truly hate a book. I hated this book. I hated the way it was written. I hated all the characters. I thought that the idea behind it was really cool. It was told in kind of 2 different writing styles. Half of it was in like scripts that the main character was writing, and the half of it was just her experiencing the story. And I just didn't care. I wish the whole thing was a script so I could have busted through it in 90 minutes. I looked up some spoiler reviews for it and I did not like the reveals that happened at the end, supposedly, so I'm good. Next up was Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. Goodbye. That's all we're going to spend the time on, and that's the last time I'm ever going to bring up that book. The Last Word by Taylor Adams was also unhauled. I did not like this book. It was in my 3 thriller reads from last year, and it was not good. I don't know what everybody else read. It gets pretty decent ratings on Goodreads, and I want to read other Taylor Adams books. This one just really did not do it for me. The villain was not good. There were too many twist endings. It way overstayed its welcome. I was done by the end of it. The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. This was good. I enjoyed this book. It's just a lot of my unhauls you'll notice are either fantasy just because I read a lot of it. So I'm going to unhaul the most of that just because that's what I'm reading. But also my thrillers and mysteries, I'm going to also be unhauling a lot of those just because like once you've read them, there's very few that I will go back and revisit, and The Devil in the Dark Water is one of those. It was good, but knowing the twists at the end, like, it's not going to be fun to reread. Not for me, at least. Then the next one was The Wilder Women by Ruth Emmy Lang. This one was one of the ones that I read early on. It was in my first book of the month box, which it was good. Again, I'm never going to revisit it. That's a vast majority of the reasons why I have unhauled these books is I'm just not going to revisit them, and I might as well allow them to get a new home somewhere where somebody is going to revisit them and love them more than I did. Then Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. Only because I got a duplicate copy of it. I have the Illumicrate edition. I don't need my book of the month edition. I haven't even read that one yet. I have no opinions on the book itself. I just really like the Illumicrate edition and don't need to. Then They Wish They Were Us by Jessica Goodman. This is a young adult thriller. And again, it's just one that I'm not going to revisit. It was fun while I read it and it was interesting, but like I'm done. I'm not going back to it. Somebody else can read it and have a good time. Same thing with The Intern by Michelle Campbell. This is one that I thought kind of got really weird at the end. It's a legal thriller and it was good. I got it in the book of the month, but I'm also going to revisit it. What a shocker. Then we actually have a couple of fantasy books. So I'm finally like not out of my not going to revisit it phase a little bit. It's still the primary reason why. But The Legend of Drizzt by R.E. Salvatore. I had the 25th anniversary edition of like the first omnibus or the first book. Not entirely sure what it was, but I just really could not get into it. I found it really dull. And my partner, I think it actually belonged to my partner first, and he also could not get into it. So now we're here and somebody else is going to read it. I had 2 friends actually who were really interested in it when I went to a book brunch a couple of weeks ago, and one of them ended up taking it. So Super excited about that. Next up was Circe by Madeline Miller. Again, just one I'm not going to revisit. I think I rated it 3 or 4 stars when I read it. Looking back on it, I'd probably rate it 3 stars. It was really good and really well written. I'm just not like in love with mythology. I like reading the stories once and then I'm done. So a lot of those I'm probably either going to do Kindle editions or get from my library from here forward. I got that one for a book club because I wanted to annotate it, and I didn't even end up annotating it. I just tabbed it because I was nervous about writing in a book for the first time. So then I also unhauled The Sisters of Sword and Song by Rebecca Ross. This was really cute. I enjoyed it, but again, I'm just gonna come back to it. I think it read very YA, and I'm just kind of was like, meh, I'm done. I'm good. I unhauled Pagan Ways by Gwydion O'Hara. This is just one that like I have a bunch of like this whole section right here. That's all witchy books for me, but I don't. You can see I have like an altar sitting back there as well. But that was one that I wasn't going to revisit again either. Gave it to somebody else. And then the last set of books that I unhauled was the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins, only because it was a mismatched set. I had 1 in paperback and 2 in hardback, and I also didn't really see myself rereading them anytime in the near future. I might go back and reread them later, and if I do, I'll get myself either special editions of them or something different. I'll do something else with them. And that's all of my unhauls. There was 18 books that I unhauled, which is pretty incredible, honestly. I'm pretty happy with myself for that one. But now we're going to get into my purchases. And actually, my purchases are not nearly as violent. I think I only have a pretty small stack here comparatively. I definitely trimmed down my library more than I added to it last month. So the first 2 books that I ended up purchasing last month were The Serpent in the Wings of Night and The Ashes in the Star-Cursed King on Audible. I've listened to Serpent in the Wings of Night, and I am currently listening to Ashes in the Star-Cursed King. So obviously enjoyed the first one enough to get the second one, and am enjoying the second one now as well. This is a duology called The Crowns of Nyaxia. It is a fantasy romance. It follows Araya, who is a human girl who was basically taken in by a vampire when she was a little girl and raised by this vampire, and now she is entering this tournament called the Kajari to basically get a wish from their goddess. And her wish is to become Vincent, her father's Coriate, which is basically like his second, or like his sworn second kind of thing. And she would become a vampire and be able to basically help him rule his kingdom. And like secure his throne forever. So that is what her goal is going into the Kajari, but she's the only human going in and facing a bunch of vampires. So it's about her, and she obviously finds a person in there, and shenanigans ensue. It was very good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really enjoying Ashes in the Star-Cursed King, but I'm not going to get into what that one's about now because major spoilers for Serpent in the Wings of Night. If you like fantasy romance or you're an ACOTAR girly, I highly recommend picking it up. It is worth the read, and it kind of helped my Sarah J. Maas hangover a little bit once I finished with ACOTAR. The rest of these are in no particular order. I'm just following the order that they're in my sheet, so that way I can make sure I get to all of them, because some of them are included in other lists from this video. So here we go. So first up is one that you saw in my last video, Malice by John Gwynne. I picked this up for a very specific reason, actually, and it is to do a little bit of research for my own book that I'm currently in the process of writing and have been for a really long time. But now that I have read more and I'm feeling more confident in my ability to dissect fantasy, I feel like I can write more confidently. I am trying to decide what type of a perspective I am writing my book in, whether it's going to be a singular third-person perspective or if it's going to be multiple third-person perspectives. This is a 4-perspective book, it seems like. Characters who are trying to fight a larger evil, which is kind of the same theming as my book. I wanted to read this to figure out, did I like the bouncing around? Is that something that I want to do? I know Game of Thrones is a lot of bouncing around, but they have so many characters that I kind of get lost, and I don't think it's worth it for me to try to read Game of Thrones when this is going to accomplish more of what I'm looking for. The next book that I hauled for the month of February was A Fragile Enchantment by Allison Saft. This is the YA Book Club edition. You can see my little sticker there from Barnes & Noble. Thanks for that. But it's also got some really cool foiling on it, and that's super neat. And then it's got pretty end papers and stuff, so that's cool. This will also be included in my wrap up here in just a second, because I did read it in February as well, actually. This is one that follows definitely a person. What's her name? So this follows Niam and Kit. Editor's note on this. I have since been informed that her name is not pronounced Niam. It is pronounced Neve because it's Irish. It's a Celtic name. And that's great. That's super cool. But I do need you all to be aware that later on in the video, when I get into my review of this book, because I did read it in February, I say Niam a lot. I tried to edit it out and just voice over Neve on all of them. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to do it anymore. Just know, I know better. I'm sorry. Please forgive. And Niam is a seamstress that works in the palace, or she is working in the palace for an event for the wedding of Kit, who is the crown prince of the kingdom from this world. And it is a Regency romance. So very Bridgerton, Pride and Prejudice kind of vibes, but it's also YA and it's got magic involved. And so it seemed really interesting. And so I picked it up because it was also the book club pick for the Citadel Book Club for the month of February. The next up were my book of the month picks, and that is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. So this is the Crimson Moth book one. I think it was called the Crimson Moth originally and actually just fairly recently had the title changed to Heartless Hunter. This one sounded interesting, but I just read the book of the month blurb, so I actually didn't read much more about it, but it was on my anticipated reads list. So, oh yeah, that's right. I'll just read this first top bit here. Enemies to Lovers doesn't get more high stakes than a witch and a witch hunter falling in love in best-selling author Kristen Cicerelli's latest romantic fantasy. That is what this one is about, which falls directly in my line of sight as something that I would be interested in. Also, I just love this cover. I think it's really good. There's that one. Then I also picked up The Mayor of Maxwell Street by Avery Cunningham. It's in Prohibition era America. I know that much. So it follows Nellie, who's an investigative journalist, and she is going after the mayor of Maxwell Street, which is like somebody who I think runs either a speakeasy or is like he's called a vice lord in this. This is her debut, and it's also fairly chonky. This is the largest book of the month book I have gotten so far. It is over 500 pages, but it sounded really interesting and really fun. This is a kind of era in American history that's interesting to me. So historical fiction, but also seems like maybe kind of thrillery at the same time, mystery maybe, or something like that. But I don't know, seems fun. But the next one I actually just unboxed today, even though it's March 6th, but it is my February Illumicrate box. So skip ahead to this timestamp if you would like to skip the spoilers for the February box if you haven't gotten yours yet. I just got mine in, so it came in a little late. But it is To Cage a God by Elizabeth May. So this is a really gorgeous, stunning cover. I love the foiling on this. And then the edges are also beautiful. I love the stained glass. They kind of almost, like with the shading and stuff, look like they're three-dimensional, which is super cool. And then the back. And then we have some very cool end papers and some nice foiling. Do we have different end papers? Oh, we do. I obviously did not look at this very hard when I was unboxing it earlier, even though I should have. So here's another end paper, which honestly, that whole vibe is like me in a nutshell. So I'm excited about this one. Also, her author photo, hello. That's fantastic. And then we have some nice foiling on the front cover as well. So this one, it's a kingdom and with powers and gods and deities and lovers and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on in this. I don't know much about it. Obviously, it's an Illumicrate box, so I didn't pick it. It just came to me, but it's also like dense. It's a heavy book for what it is. It's also a large number of pages. It's like 450 pages or a little bit more than, but this seems really fascinating and I'm interested to see it. So that'll be cool. The next one is the next one in the Throne of Glass series, and that's Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. You saw this in my last video. It is on my TBR for the month of March. I'm buying these as I go through them because I don't want to like have a whole series sitting on my shelf that like I haven't really touched for I think what is either the third or fourth time that I've mentioned it on this channel. I read The Assassin's Blade first and then Throne of Glass, and now I'm in Crown of Midnight. I have zero regrets doing that so far. I do plan on also doing the tandem read once I get to that point in the series, but I'll talk more about what that is and what that looks like then. But I have zero regrets on that reading order. I think The Assassin's Blade provides some very, very much needed context for Celaena's character because I almost DNF'd Throne of Glass, and I am a Sarah J. Maas fan, and I almost gave up on Throne of Glass. If I had not read Assassin's Blade first, I probably would have DNF'd the series because I really did not like Celaena before I read that book. The more you know. And then last but not least, Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This was a pre-order that I had. It got here on the 6th. This is Ali Hazelwood's debut into paranormal romance. So this is her first kind of wandering into that genre. It's about a vampire princess named Misery who gets into a marriage of convenience with the new alpha of a werewolf pack or the werewolf-like group in this world, and then kind of marriage of convenience enemies to lovers, it seems like, to like keep a treaty alive. So I am really looking forward to this one. I love the cover. I didn't realize it was going to be like shiny, but it is. It does have foiling and stuff on it, and I just really enjoy this concept. So this is also on my TBR for the month of March. And then the last book that I hauled this month was actually a gift from a friend of mine. Hi AJ, if you're watching. But that is Witch and Wombat by Carolyn Cushman. Apparently this author was an editor of a bunch of different fantasy novels and then wrote her own book. And this is like the only thing that she's ever published, but it was published in 1994. So this is it was published the same year I was born. Hey, what's up? And it shows, right? Like it gets right into the book and then it just like ends. This is one of the things that AJ pointed out to me. It just stops. It just ends. There is no like acknowledgments in the back, but basically there's like psychic magic and magic shortages, and there's like sorcerers and dragons and fairies, and it just seems like a lot of fun. And I think AJ's right. This does seem right up my alley as far as books that I would read. I did actually haul less books last month than I unhauled, which I am proud of. However, that is not going to be true for another couple of months because I basically culled my whole collection down to what I wanted to get rid of. So, and I got rid of all of them. They're all gone now. So unless I get rid of some more either book of the month books or maybe an Illumicrate book or two that I don't want anymore this month, which I doubt is going to happen since I haven't read any of them, or I've read some of them, but not all of them. I need to remember that they're also an option for me. I have them in like a special section and I forget about that. So I'm going to put all these back on the shelves now. And then we're going to talk about the books that I read in February. All right. Ugh. Oh my God. So now let's get into I just cracked my back. I've reached the age where like cracking your back is like, it feels good, but it feels bad at the same time. That was horrifying. Okay. Let's get into now the books that I read in the month of February and my reviews on them. I'm going to include my CAWPILE rating for each of these so that you can see what they actually ended up being rated in comparison. Because some of these that like I rated 4 stars or 3 stars. They're either like a really high 3-star, a really low 3-star or whatever. Like the CAWPILE system seems to be a better indication of how I actually felt about a book as opposed to a 5-star system, which is how I give myself my ratings for Goodreads. But at least I can then have like, I can at the end of the year, I will probably have a tier list of like, this is in order my favorites of the year. So I'll be curious to see how that reflects on my book bracket, because the book bracket itself is going to only have my favorites of the month, but it's possible that like if March is a weaker reading month in February, for example, I could have a book that was my favorite in March, but that doesn't rank as highly as like 3 of my books in February, but it's still in my book bracket. How fascinating. Anyway, let's get started. So the first book that I completed in the month of February was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I've talked about this in some capacity. My CAWPILE is down below. It was a total average rating of 7.71, which puts it in 4-star territory. I really enjoyed this. I've talked about this a couple of times. I'm not going to harp on it too much because it's not necessarily news to anybody if you've been watching my videos, or even if you've watched up to this point in this video, because it's not the first time I brought it up here either. But this is, I almost DNF'd this. In fact, I did DNF this book and decided to read Assassin's Blade first. And I'm so glad that I did, because Selena in this book, without the context of Assassin's Blade, is irritating. She's pushy. She's stubborn, but not in like endearing ways. It's very like, I'm a teenager and I know what's best ways. And if you don't have the context of like, oh, you earned that mentality though, what are we doing here? So this follows Selena as she is taken out of a prison and brought in to work for the prince of the kingdom that she's a part of, basically to be his champion in a tournament. And so her going through this tournament and the things that happen there, and there's obviously a whole bunch of world building that happens because this is in theory the first book in a series. So, and even still, it's only the second book in a series that was just a few novellas before this. So this has a lot to it. I really enjoyed the characters in it. I thought that their development was really good, and I am looking forward to seeing where everybody ends up. I did feel like the king got a little mustache twirly for my taste as a villain. He was a little too obviously a villain, but I also have to remember that this is a YA book, and so of course that's how he is. That's how most villains are in YA. But I did also think that there is room for his character to have development as time goes on and maybe be a little bit less like obviously villainous about most of the things that he does. And then I do hope that in future installments we get to explore more of the world. Like there's a gigantic map in the first part of this. Where is it? There we go. Like There's so much that we can explore here, and we've only seen like a corner of the world so far. So I am excited to see where we end up. February was truly the month of sequels for me because Throne of Glass was, to me, a sequel. I also read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I'd been kind of putting this one off. I got it as a Christmas gift, and I've been putting it off a little bit. Obviously not as much as some other books that I've had on here, but because I've heard from some people that this was not nearly as good as the first one, as Fourth Wing, and that and I know there were a lot of publishing issues with it, but another friend of mine had read Fourth Wing and then was going through ACOTAR at my recommendation. And so, or maybe at her coworker's recommendation and then my insistence after that. I don't know exactly. We both ended up kind of reading these together almost. So I read Iron Flame at her insistence that I read it so that she could talk to somebody about it. And I ended up rating this one a 4-star. It was an 8.85. So it was almost a 5-star. I really enjoyed it, but so much happened in this book. Oh my God. The thing about this for me is I have no idea how we're going to fill 3 more books. This is supposed to be a 5-book series. How are we supposed to fill 3 more books? There's a lot that's going on here. One of the things that I think we could have done a little bit less of is we tried to recapture enemies to lovers in this one, which was the main trope of the first book, and it didn't hit quite as hard, but the world building in this was so good. Oh my God. I was so stressed while reading this book, and the very end of it made me want to throw it. And we have no release date for the 3rd book, which honestly, like, my disappointment as a reader is immeasurable. I need the 3rd book. I want it. But my understanding of holy crap, girl, give yourself a break because these 2 were both released in 2023 is also there. Like, chill. Calm down. Please take the time to like not rush it out because I do want to see not the same issues that Iron Flame had. And I think that taking that break is a good thing because I think Rebecca Yarros, she also released In the Likely Event, I think last year too. So she had 3 titles released last year, which is insane. So, but this was really good with no spoilers. I was so tired after reading because there was so much going on in it at all times. So very, very much enjoyed this. Gave it 4 stars. Can't wait for the 3rd one to come out. All right. Next up was one that I brought up in a lot of videos. That is something that I had not yet read, but I needed to. And that is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I did finally read this one. I ended up giving it a 6.42 overall average CAWPILE score, which puts it in 3-star territory. I do agree with the masses on this one that I think this is her weakest book, at least from a romance perspective. I don't think that I think it was the most predictable. It was fun. And I still had a great time with it because I do with all of Ali Hazelwood's books. But I do think that B, at least for me, was the least relatable protagonist out of all of these people. On the flip side, I think that Levi was a total cinnamon bun, and I would have really liked to see more of their actual romance. They spend a lot of time being just kind of casual or being friends and stuff like that. And I just, I wish that we could have gotten a little bit more of their actual relationship. I also think that she spends a lot of time being really harsh to Levi for kind of no reason. He didn't really earn it. There's a lot of telling and not showing of why things are so terrible between the 2 of them given their history. That's really disappointing to see because of the fact that we could see it in The Love Hypothesis did a much better job of showing why things are bad between them than this one, which was just kind of yeah, he just hated me. And it was super obvious that he didn't. And I know that's predictable in romances, but come on. Are you really that blind? I enjoyed it. I'm glad I have it. I'm probably not going to unhaul it because I will likely revisit all of Ali Hazelwood's books at some point in the future. But this is definitely the weakest one I think of hers by far. The next one I actually read from my library, and that is Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. This is a really cool edition of it. I will say I love this cover, and it's got some sprayed edges, which is super cool. And they're really cheap for what they are actually. So, however, this is one that's been on my list for a while because, as some of you may know, and certainly some of you that watch this video, I am part of a pirate clan. We are called Clan Jellyfish, and we go to Ren fairs all the time and do events and stuff like that. And it's a great time. So literal pirate. I got married at Ren Fair. I will put up a picture of me in my dress right here so that you can see that this is what we do. This is one of those that I've been anticipating reading for a long time. And I think those expectations worked against it a little bit here because my average score for it ended up being a 5.57, which landed in 3-star territory, and it was my lowest rated book of the month. This follows Alosa and Raiden. Alosa is the daughter of the Pirate King. She is sent on a covert mission by her father to this rival band of pirates to try to recover a piece of a secret map from them, basically. She's there trying to find out where the map is, and she ends up falling in love with the first mate. This felt very small, and I know that's kind of a weird criticism to have because A, it's a short book anyway, it's a small book, but B, I did not get a lot of like super high stakes from this a lot of the time until like the end, and the end was pretty good, but this just read very YA to me, and I don't think I'm like a super YA kind of person. I think that the age group matters a lot to me when I'm reading it, just because like either it gets really predictable or I struggle to get into the writing style or whatever it may be. This is just one of those that really struggled with that for me. Their romance felt really insta-lovey, and I will likely carry through with the series through my library. I did not love it enough to purchase my own copy of it. Maybe that will change through the other installments, but it's just one of those that like feels on brand for me, but I don't know. I didn't love it. It wasn't great, but it's also going to be a lower priority for me on this. So, and the edition, like you can't really beat this edition, honestly, like the foiling on it, and you've got some cool like end papers with the ship, and you can't see it underneath the thing, but there is foiling on the cover as well. The next one that I read was one that I read on Kindle, and that is The Right Move by Liz Tomford. This is the sequel to Mile High, which I read last month. This one I ended up rating a 7.57. It was a 4-star. I think I actually ended up rating this one lower than I rated Mile High. Maybe it's just because I went into Mile High with lower expectations. Oh no, I did rate it higher than Mile High. Mile High was a 7.14 for comparison. So this one I did rate higher than Mile High. My first line of my review in my reading journal is Ryan Shea is a cinnamon bun and must be protected at all costs. This book also just kind of proves that the fake dating trope is my favorite trope of all time, which I think is why I love like the love hypothesis, and I'm excited for Marriage of Convenience because I think that they're kind of in a similar vein. There are obviously differences between the two, but I think that two people kind of like being put into a situation. It's all that forced proximity stuff that's similar. This also had all kinds of he falls first and he falls hard energy to it, which I always love. I'm always here for. I thought the concerns that Ryan had were really, really valid. The thing I did not like, and this is a spoiler, so skip ahead to this time frame if you don't want to hear a spoiler about this, is that at the end of the book, Ryan buys a house without talking to Indy first. And I think this is a personal preference thing for me. I hate that kind of stuff in romances. I hate the big gestures that are like big life decision type things without discussing them with your partner. Big romantic gestures like proposals and stuff like that, like I like those are cute. But buying a house should not be done without talking to the other person first, even though he did it for her and he did it so that she could have the things that she wanted. I didn't like that. That is like the thing that stopped it from being a 5-star for me. The rest of it was great. I really liked them. I liked the callbacks to Xander's and Stevie. Anyway, that's that one. Moving on to the next one, which I read, which was A Fragile Enchantment by Allison Saft, which we just talked about in my hauls. So we already kind of got the rundown of the plot for this one. This follows Kit and Niam. Niam is a seamstress who can enchant fabrics. She's hired to make clothing for Kit's arranged wedding to another kingdom, basically. I gave this a flat 6.0 across the board, which puts it in 3-star territory. This is something that I did note as well in my reading journal. I love this reading journal. Everybody should have a reading journal. Even though I rated this higher than Daughter of the Pirate King, I think this may actually be my biggest disappointment for the month, because I've been looking at this one as long as I was looking at A Study in Drowning, because I think they came out at the same time. The characters just felt so much younger. This read so much more YA. The Regency drama, like there was a lot of it that I just kind of like didn't care about. Kit has such wild mood swings, and I know that's kind of part of his character and that's like part of his whole deal, but at the same time, then like I didn't fall in love with him as a character, as a romance interest. And I thought that Niam was really, really naive for a lot of the book. Them getting together at the end didn't feel super earned. And the whole, like, I must protect my brother at all costs mentality that Kit has felt really out of place for him, because everything else that we know about him, he's kind of selfish. I liked the world. I wish that it had been better. And I will probably unhaul this at some point, which is unfortunate because it's a cool copy of the book. But like, let me put it this way. I feel like there is such a cool world here and a cool magic system, and it just kind of goes nowhere. And I wish that we had more to it than that. And I wish that it hadn't been a YA Regency drama that was set in this world. The next up were 2 more that I read from my library, but I had to return them because they both had other people waiting on them. So I needed to make sure that they got back. And that was Shatter Me and Destroy Me by Tahara Mafi. These were both really good. So Shatter Me got a 7.85 and Destroy Me got a 7.28. Shatter Me is the first book in the Shatter Me series, and Destroy Me is a novella from one of the characters' point of view that takes place directly after, or directly like toward the latter half of Shatter Me. And they were both included in the same book, which is why I read both of them. It was so unexpectedly good. I had had 2 YA books that had kind of fallen down for me, and I was really, really hesitant about getting into another YA series, but a lot of people really liked it, but I didn't know if it was going to be more from a like nostalgia perspective, like people read them when they were in middle school and high school and like really enjoyed them, or what. I really, really liked them. I loved the weird writing style. I liked the fact that it was kind of like off the wall, and like you follow the protagonist as she gets more and more stable in her mind, and that's super interesting, and you see that playing out on the page. The character development was really good. I really appreciated the lack of like surprise plot twists at the end, and we actually get to go into like another book feeling like the characters are good still and liking the same characters that we like in this one for the most part. So that's cool too. Like I think it was just a really nice like breath of fresh air, even though it was published in 2011. It's nice to like feel this way. And then I also really enjoyed in Destroy Me getting Warner's perspective on things. I didn't think I was going to like it because he felt so like comical, but actually reading his novella made him less comical and made him more like, oh, so you're like really fucked up. So I am really excited to see where these characters end up. For those who don't know, Shatter Me follows our protagonist, whose name I cannot remember for the life of me and didn't write it down. She starts off in an insane asylum because she killed somebody, and you find out that her touch kills people. Like, she will kill you if you touch her. It takes place in a dystopian world where like basically humanity has killed the world, and now there's this big corporate kind of entity that rules everything. Basically, they want to use her to like put down rebellions and stuff like that. It's fascinating. It's a cool world. It's a cool story. The magic system slash like, it's not really magic, it's sci-fi, it's not fantasy, but the powers and stuff in this are really interesting, and like I just find it to be fascinating. I'm gonna definitely continue with it as time goes on because I'm fascinated, and that might be one that I purchase actually. We'll see. Then the next one was another one that I read on digitally, but I actually did it with audio, and that is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I talked about this one a little bit in my previous video as well as a little bit earlier on because I purchased it in February along with its sequel via Audible, and this one got a 9.14 from me, so that puts it in 5-star territory. This I really enjoyed. I was really looking forward to the next one. I'm obviously in the middle of it now. It kind of cured me from my ACOTAR hangover, even though I had been putting off A Court of Silver Flames, and I very much wanted to add it to my physical library, which if you notice, right there's the physical copy of it. So this follows Araya, who is fighting in the Kajari, which I think I did talk about this already. You heard the plot synopsis. I loved this story. It was brutal. It was horrifying. It was sad. It was amazing. And I would highly recommend that you go and do this if you liked ACOTAR. Next up, I do actually have a physical book. Now, the rest of these are all physical, is Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is one that was a leftover from my backlist from last year, released in October of last year. And I had been kind of putting it off, and I added it because it was a Bookopoly prompt for last year. I'd been kind of wanting to read it during the summer since it takes place at a summer camp, but I'm kind of glad that I read it now because it just felt like warm and cozy at the same time. This follows Russ and Aurora. Russ is one of the hockey players from Icebreaker, which is Hannah Grace's debut. This is the two of them have a one-night stand at a party. They think they're never going to see each other again, and then they end up being camp counselors at the same summer camp. It's a very like forced proximity romance that's just a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And this is one of those books that like made the characters super relatable individually, and then putting them together, it just was like explosive chemistry. Hannah Grace is one of my favorite romance authors as well right now. She only has the 2 books out, but Daydream is coming out later this year. It's on my list already. I'm watching you. And because I didn't say what I actually ended up giving this one, I rated it a flat 8.0, which puts it firmly into 4-star territory. Next up is the one, I finally did it, A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. Yes, I do have custom dust jackets for these. Nerdy Inc. was closing down their collection, and so I pulled the trigger and bought them. So this one ended up getting a 9.71, which is firmly a 5-star read for me. I loved this book. I didn't at first, but I ended up really enjoying it at the end because I went into this book firmly being a Nesta hater and came out really appreciating her character. So for those who don't know, this is the 4th or fifth book in the ACOTAR series, depending on how you look at it, but the fourth full-size book in ACOTAR, and it follows Feyre's sister Nesta as she deals with her everything. There's really no other way to describe it. She's dealing with the effects of the war and everything else that goes on. Avoiding spoilers for the rest of ACOTAR if you haven't read it yet. It has character development. It has a plot that doesn't quit. It has good high stakes without the stakes being so high that I was like stressed all the time like I was in A Court of Wings and Ruin. And I liked the fact that it was like a little bit of a more contained story with like splices of like, here's what's going on in the outside world still and the characters that you're familiar with. I am looking forward to, if there is a next installment, looking forward to it. If there's not, here I come rereads, you know, that's just where it's the way it is. That's where I'm going to be. I love also the fact that Nesta's actions are not excused as a part of this book. They are explained and she has to deal with them, but they are not excused. She is not being told like, oh, it's fine that you acted this. Like, no, she's told exactly the opposite. Literally almost a perfect 10 out of 10. Awesome. Also, it's chonky and definitely hurt my hand. The last one on my list is The Case Study of Vanitas Volume 2 by Jun Mochizuki. This was really fun as well. I ended up rating this one a 9.57, which is also a 5-star read. So I ended the month really, really strong. I have a feeling it's going to be hard for this to not get 5 stars from me because again, it's just very good. We got a lot of Noe's backstory on this one. Holy shit, is it dark. I really like the addition of Dominique as a character. She seems really fun. It also seems like toward the end of this volume that Vanitas could be being kind of set up to be almost a little bit like villainous, which I kind of hope doesn't happen, but I also kind of hope does because that would be really fascinating. For those who don't know, I would recommend watching my January wrap up. I talked about the first installment there, but this follows Noe and Vanitas and a whole bunch of other side characters too, but primarily Noe and Vanitas. Noe is the person on the cover of this one. Noe is a vampire and Vanitas calls himself a vampire doctor and he fixes vampires using magic. And that's as far as I'm willing to tell you because it's really just something that kind of has to be experienced. I am borrowing the series up through book 7, I think, from Kira right now, but I will eventually go pick it up. I went to our local manga shop, Kinokuniya, and it had every volume except for 2 in stock. And so I was like, I'm not buying 3 until I have read 2. So I borrow in those series from Kira and then I'll pick them up eventually. But this is very fun. And with that is all 12 books that I read in February. Now, there are 2 things that I want to note here. Number 1 is that I did have 2 DNFs and I want to kind of rant about them for just a second. First one isn't really a rant. So I DNF'd The Keep, which is the one that my mom chose for me. I'm sorry, Mom. I talked to her about this a little bit already. I was so not in the mood for horror this month and I could tell that I would like the book, but I was like, I don't want to read this right now. So I will probably end up reading it in a later month, but I'm not sure which one yet. But I will read it. It will happen. So there's that one. But the other one that I DNF'd, take a seat. Let's chat for a second, shall we? The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic. I have thoughts and feelings about this one. This book had no idea what it wanted to be. I got to about the 150 page mark. I think I was on page like 154 when I DNF'd it. I also had it from my library and I could have renewed it to keep around to hold up during this, but I didn't. I just turned it in because why? It was advertised as Practical Magic meets Gilmore Girls and I could see the inspirations from both of those. However, it just flat didn't do them well. There was so much going on. There was like 4 different plots going on. I was just finding it hard to care about any of it. And then as I was like considering whether or not I wanted to keep going, I was like, this is a romance. They're going to be fairly predictable. I'm just going to look up some spoiler reviews for this. And honestly, I'm so glad that I did and I didn't waste any more time. So from here forward is going to be a spoiler of The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic from somebody who has not actually read it. So keep that in mind as you're going through it, but skip to here if you don't want to hear it. Here's the issue. The main guy who's, I think his name was Jake. I think it was like Jake and Sadie or something. I don't remember exactly. He comes back into town. She has issues with like heartbreak because it's her curse to lose her magic is that she will experience 4 major heartbreaks and he was the first one. And so he comes back into this small town and is like flirting with Sadie and leading her on and like trying to talk to her about things and things are getting really serious and stuff. The problem that I have is, and the thing that made me DNF the book is that apparently Jake, the entire time that this is happening, is engaged and going to be a dad. But then it turns out that the pregnancy from his fiance is not her, like, not his. She cheated on him, I guess. And that's supposed to make everything okay? Like, no, dude, you were still like, even if nothing actually physically happened, which it hadn't by the point that I had gotten there, it's very possible that it would have. I don't know if it does or not, but you were still emotionally cheating on your fiance. Why am I supposed to root for you after that? Why am I supposed to root for her when she can't see so far out her own ass that, like, she can't see what's right in front of her? She steals his dog at the beginning of their story together and, like, doesn't realize that she's done it. She thinks he's kind of like a stray kind of a thing at the beginning. But as soon as she realizes that it's his, she doesn't return the dog. He has to, like, discover it. And then he's like, oh, haha, you silly. What? I don't understand where I have such opinions. If you're gonna write a romance book, please make your characters likable. Mistakes are human. Mistakes are a thing that people need to make in order for there to be conflict and for there to be story and for there to be interesting. That is not forgivable to me. These two people are awful. I don't care about their story. I don't care about anything else. Stop. That's all. That's all I wanted to say about that. So that is all 12/14 books that I read in the month of February. I actually had a great time reading this month. I read a lot. Overall, I think that this was a really successful month, even though I had a couple that I was able to rant about a little bit. But honestly, like, who doesn't love a little bit of drama in these videos, right? Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in the month of February down below, or let me know what your least favorite book from the month of February was down below. Also, let me know if you disagree with any of my opinions. I would love to hear it. And then I will be back somewhere toward the end of this month to discuss my next TBR, also to discuss my March wrap up at some point. I might do another haul video at some point because I just went book shopping again and none of those books were pictured here because why would they be? They weren't purchased in February. This is a February wrap up. But in the meantime, I hope you are practicing safe text. Bye.